Hey everyone, today we are talking all things book clubs. Specifically, I'm going to share 3 different tips for running book clubs effectively in a kindergarten, 1st, and 2nd grade classroom. Now, you might be wondering, book clubs, especially in kindergarten and 1st grade, is that even possible? Maybe some 2nd grade classrooms haven't even done it yet, but I have done this very successfully in both kindergarten and 1st grade classrooms, and I'm excited to share some of my tips for helping this run smoothly in your classroom. If you are excited about getting your students running book clubs, go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, make sure you like it, and if you want to know tons of teaching tips for grades kindergarten, 1st, and 2nd grade, be sure to subscribe to my channel. I upload new videos every Thursday and Sunday morning, sharing tons of tips, ideas, activities, and freebies with K-2 teachers like you. In case you are new here, my name is Susan Jones. I am a former 1st grade teacher and K-2 literacy teacher who now spends a lot of time here on YouTube while I am currently getting my master's in curriculum and instruction. So let's get started with those book club tips. Now, when we are talking about book clubs in a K-2 classroom, there are a couple things I want you to keep in mind. First, we are thinking about the long game. We are thinking about those long-term relationships that we have with books and how they can be fun to discuss with others. I would not expect your K-2 students to master this idea of a book club by the end of the year. But what we are doing is kind of building those little stepping stones to get students used to the idea of meeting with each other and discussing our books. Secondly, why do we do this in the first place? Because it gives students independence and ownership over their own learning, specifically over their own reading. In K-2 classrooms, the teacher is so often kind of directing the conversation and really bringing up any comprehension questions, any reading strategies. In these book clubs, students get the opportunity to try to be the one in charge, right? They get to be in charge of their own learning and discuss what they want to discuss about their books. I generally like to introduce book clubs to my students in the spring. Up here in Massachusetts, we always have an April vacation, which is like the 3rd week in April. So when students get back from that, we have all of May, and that I find to be a great time to introduce this to my kids, to get them used to meeting in a book club. They learn what a book club is, how we discuss things in a book club, and getting used to kind of just meeting in groups and discussing our learning. All right, that being said, tip number 1 for running book clubs in a K-2 classroom is tell them exactly what to talk about. By no means can you just get your K-2 students and tell them, hey everyone, you 5 students are gonna read this same book and I want you to meet together and talk about it. Have fun. That just doesn't work. You need to give them pretty clear guidelines on what they're going to talk about, and I have a few different ways I like to do this. First, you need to get students thinking about the book as they read it so they can be prepared when they get to their actual book club. After you've assigned their books, I like to give students little book club bookmarks that look like this. These little talking points get students thinking about what they can talk about when they finally meet with their groups. You can see questions on here like, who are the characters in this story? Do you relate to any of them? Where and when does the story take place? Are there any tricky words you came across? Did you enjoy this story? Why or why not? Getting students' brains kind of activated before they go into their book club is an important part of this process. Secondly, once students are in their book clubs, I like to give them little discussion rings that look like this. There are a bunch of different topics and each card kind of covers a specific topic like characters, who is the main character, did they change in the story, how so? We talk about our opinions, there's one for setting, problem and solution, and other things like that. These are just going to help guide the discussion, and realistically, especially in K and 1 classrooms, your students will probably just go ahead and say a question and then everyone in the group can kind of answer it, or they can take turns answering it. You can teach them a couple different ways to do that. Having discussion questions already ready to go that can be applied to almost any book are important. Think about it, even in our adult book clubs, we usually print out book club guides and questions to guide the conversation. Tip number 2. All right, tip number 2 is to go ahead and give specific job assignments. Those discussion rings are a great way to get students started and give them a starting off point when they are meeting in their book clubs, but pretty soon after they're comfortable with that, I like to give them these specific jobs. I went ahead and created some K-2 friendly job cards that look like this. You can see here that I made fun little names for them like the word wheel, and they will go ahead and see if they found any new vocabulary words or important words that they want to bring to their book club, the retell rabbit, who will be in charge of retelling the story and answering some important questions, the problem pig focuses on the problem and solution, the connection crab is someone who will make any connections to the story and their life or from one book to another book. There's the character cat, who has to answer some character-based questions, and the setting snake, who talks about the setting of the story and answers some questions around that. Now, I love assigning these jobs because it takes that independence up another level. By giving students each their own job card, they now have a focus when they are reading their story, and they have a specific job and focus when they actually get into their book club. They are responsible for bringing that information and kind of focusing on it with their book club. Now, those job cards are something I would give once I have assigned the book, because that way they already know, like I said, what they're in charge of before they meet with their book club. I wouldn't give them a book to read and then assign their job. This way they're kind of focusing in on one part of the story as they read it. And honestly, my students just love getting those job cards. They think they are a lot of fun. And last but not least, tip number 3 is to keep it short. When I have done this with my K-2 students, I don't switch up my whole literacy block in order to teach book clubs. Again, I try to keep it thinking about that long game in mind. Now, when I was teaching in 1st grade, we would use the reading workshop model, and during that independent reading time is when I would pull my small groups to work on different phonics skills or comprehension strategies or whatever kind of skill-based strategy I was trying to teach that group of learners. And I was not willing to give up that entire section of my reading day. It was just way too important to focus on book clubs. That being said, I would go ahead and take about 10 to 15 minutes of your entire reading block time and dedicate it to those book clubs for a good week or 2. Again, you're doing this in the spring, so by then you probably have a bunch of students that are able to at least read and decode pretty fluently on their own. Now, to make this work, we would pretty much stick to 1 book per week that your students are using for their book club. And each group will have their own book that's completely based on their own reading level. So some of your higher level students, and if you're in 2nd grade, I definitely use chapter books, don't get me wrong, and that would definitely take probably more than a week. And for those students, quick aside for my 2nd grade teachers here, those students, I would not just use 1 book per week. Instead, I would assign them each jobs, and they would have that job for probably a couple chapters. And then after maybe 3 or 4 chapters that your students would read slowly throughout that week, they could switch jobs the next week as they go on to more chapters of their book. I'm thinking about 1st grade here, and I'm thinking about those kind of EFG reading level books that your students might be at in the springtime. They could pretty much choose 1 job card and read that book and assign those job cards and then talk about it towards the end of the week, spread out over a week. So how that would work is at the beginning of the week, those first 10 to 15 minutes we talk about book clubs. I would explain what book clubs are, as well as some of the ways that we can respectfully discuss our topics. Here's an anchor chart I like to use talking about that. Students would be put into their book club group so they can know each other, and they will be introduced with their new book. Then on the 2nd and 3rd day of the week, students would be able to receive their jobs for the book and start reading their book during that 10 minutes of wherever you're putting it in your reading block. So like I said, I did reading workshop, and students would have their own book bins filled with books and decodable readers that I wanted them to focus on. And then we would kind of have book club time where they would focus on reading their book club book specifically. After spending 2 days preparing and getting ready for our role in our book club, we would spend Thursday and Friday getting in our groups and actually discussing. Now, since we only spend about 10 minutes per group, and depending on how many people you had in your group, you would probably split it up and maybe 2 people would talk during one day, and that way the other ones could respond and see if they have any questions or discussion points. And then on Friday or the next day, the other 2 students or 3 students, however many you have, would go ahead and discuss their roles and their job and their part of their book club. So I hope that makes sense. Basically, you take the book club, their jobs, and their book, and you kind of spread it out slowly throughout the week. This also really helps because the worst thing you can hear when you are running book clubs is, Miss Jones, we finished talking. We have nothing else to say. And you kind of look down and it's been about 3 minutes and you're like, okay, well, this didn't go well. So I really like to keep those book clubs short and keep them focused. Now, also during that 10 to 15 minutes, this is when you as the teacher can walk around. I would definitely pull my lower level groups during that time, and we would kind of go over some of those discussion points together. And on Thursday and Friday when they're meeting, I would make a point of meeting with them specifically to kind of guide along the conversation and see how it's going. So there you have 3 of my favorite tips for running book clubs in a K-2 classroom. All of the job cards and anchor charts and all of that I actually have in a book club unit that I have over on TPT. It's relatively inexpensive. I believe it's about $4. And I go ahead and list out exactly how I do book clubs in my classroom and share those cards and ideas with you. I'll go ahead and link that down in the description in case you want to check that out. So I would love to know, do you run book clubs in your classroom? How do you do it? And do you have any other tips for K-2 teachers? Let me know down in the comments. I love when teachers share their ideas and what is working in their classroom so we can all read it and learn from it. As always, I do hope you enjoyed this video. Please go ahead and give me a thumbs up so I know. Make sure you are subscribed to my channel and click that bell. That way you're notified of every new week's video. See you next time. Bye.